The gunshots echoed across the open plains as Beatrice Vance clutched her two young children to her chest, her heart hammering wildly beneath her worn cotton dress. The stagecoach lay overturned behind them, its driver dead, and the escort guards scattered like broken dolls across the dusty Arizona road. Her husband of 8 years had been among them, his lifeless eyes staring at the cloudless sky. She hadn't even had time to mourn him. "Please," she begged, looking up at the masked men surrounding her, their guns still smoking in the afternoon sun of 1875. "These children have done nothing. They're innocent." 10-year-old Emma and 7-year-old Thomas trembled against her, their faces streaked with tears and dust. They'd been on their way to Seligman, Arizona, to start a new life after the drought had taken their farm in Kansas. The leader of the bandits, a tall man with cold eyes visible through his mask, stepped forward. "Your husband shouldn't have tried to be a hero, madam. Now hand over whatever valuables you've got hidden away." "We have nothing," Beatrice said, her voice breaking. "Everything we owned was in that chest they took. Please, have mercy for my children." The bandit raised his gun, aiming it directly at her forehead when a voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I reckon that's about enough." The bandits whirled around. Standing 20 yards away was a lone figure, tall and imposing against the setting sun. His black hat was pulled low over his eyes, but there was no mistaking the deadly intent in his stance or the gleaming Colt revolver in his hand. "This ain't your business, stranger," the bandit leader called out. "Ride on if you know what's good for you." The stranger took 3 measured steps forward. "A woman with children crying for mercy. I'd say that makes it my business." Beatrice held her breath as the standoff intensified. The children pressed closer to her. "Last chance," the bandit warned, turning his gun toward the newcomer. The stranger's response was simple. The lady asked for mercy. His voice was as steady as the mountains in the distance. "Then mercy's what you'll have." What happened next unfolded in seconds. The stranger's hand moved with lightning speed. 2 shots rang out in quick succession, and 2 bandits fell. The others scrambled for cover, but the stranger was already moving, firing with deadly precision. One bandit managed to get off a shot that grazed the stranger's arm, but it didn't slow him down. When the dust settled, 5 bandits lay dead or wounded. The leader was on his knees, his gun hand shattered by a bullet. "Get on your horse and ride," the stranger told him. "Tell anyone thinking of robbing innocents on this road that Archer O'Malley protects it now." The bandit leader scrambled to his feet and fled, leaving his wounded companions behind. Beatrice remained frozen, shielding her children, unsure if their savior might prove just as dangerous. The man named Archer holstered his gun and approached slowly, removing his hat to reveal sun-weathered features and kind eyes that belied the deadliness she'd just witnessed. "Madam," he said softly, "are you and your children hurt?" "No," Beatrice whispered, finding her voice. You saved us." "That's what needed doing," he replied simply. He looked at the overturned stagecoach and the bodies scattered around it. "I'm sorry about your husband." Tears welled in Beatrice's eyes. "How did you know? The way you're holding those children, like they're all you've got left in the world." He knelt down to eye level with Emma and Thomas. "My name's Archer. What's yours?" "Emma," the girl said quietly, "and this is Thomas. Pleased to meet you both. Your ma's been very brave." Beatrice swallowed hard. "I'm Beatrice Vance. We were headed to Seligman." Archer nodded. "It's about 15 miles from here. Night's coming soon. We should make camp and head there in the morning." "We have nothing," Beatrice said. "They took everything." Archer looked at the bandits he'd subdued. "Let's see about getting your belongings back first." He walked over to the groaning bandits and retrieved a small chest and a carpet bag. "These yours?" Beatrice nodded gratefully. "We'll need to bury your husband and the others," Archer said gently. "It's not right to leave them for the buzzards." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Archer dug graves using a shovel from the stagecoach while Beatrice comforted her children. He worked tirelessly, his strong arms moving earth with determined efficiency. When he finished, Beatrice stood beside the graves as Archer spoke a few simple words over them. "I didn't even know your name," she whispered to her husband's grave. James had been a good man, if not always the easiest to live with. He'd never raised a hand to her or the children, which was more than many women could say. They'd been making their way west for a chance at a better life after the bank had taken their farm. That night, Archer built a small fire and shared his provisions with them. The children, exhausted from their ordeal, fell asleep quickly beside the warmth of the flames. "You're handy with a gun," Beatrice said quietly as she and Archer sat across from each other, the firelight casting dancing shadows across their faces. "Former cavalry," he replied. "Served during the war and after against the Apaches for a time. And now," Archer stared into the fire, "just a man trying to find his place, was heading to Seligman myself, heard they need a deputy. You'd make a good one from what I've seen." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Maybe." "What about you? What waits in Seligman, my sister?" Beatrice answered. "She and her husband run a small boarding house. They said they could use help and we needed somewhere to go after." She trailed off. "After you lost the farm," Archer finished for her. She looked up in surprise. "How did you know?" "Your hands," he said. "They're a farmer's hands, strong but gentle. And there's been drought all through Kansas and parts east." Beatrice stared down at her calloused palms. James was determined to start over. He heard about land opportunities in Arizona territory. "It's a hard land," Archer warned. "Beautiful, but it takes as much as it gives." "I don't have the luxury of being afraid of hard work, Mr. O'Malley." "Just Archer," he corrected gently. "And I didn't mean to suggest you did. Just that Seligman's still growing. It's not the settled town your sister's letters might have described." Beatrice's brow furrowed. "You know Seligman well. Passed through a couple times. It's a railroad town still finding its feet. Some rough elements, but good people too." They fell into silence, each lost in their own thoughts as the fire crackled between them. "You should get some sleep," Archer eventually said. "I'll keep watch. You need rest too." "I'm used to short nights, been that way since the war." Beatrice studied him for a moment. There was something in his eyes, a sadness perhaps, or a weight he carried. But there was kindness too, and a steadiness she found herself drawn to despite the circumstances. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for saving us, but for treating us like people worth saving." Archer looked up, meeting her gaze across the flames. "Everyone deserves mercy, Mrs. Vance, especially those brave enough to ask for it." The morning came with the harsh brightness of the desert sun. Archer had already rekindled the fire and was brewing coffee in a battered tin pot when Beatrice awoke. The children stirred soon after, their faces showing momentary confusion before the memories of yesterday came rushing back. "Is Pa really gone?" Thomas asked, his small voice breaking Beatrice's heart anew. She gathered him close. "Yes, sweetheart, but we'll always remember him." "Are the bad men coming back?" Emma asked, her eyes darting nervously to the horizon. "No," Archer answered firmly from his position by the fire. "They won't be bothering anyone for a while." They ate a simple breakfast of hardtack and jerky from Archer's provisions. As they prepared to leave, Beatrice watched Archer saddle his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion. "We can't all fit on your horse," she observed. Archer nodded toward a small copse of trees nearby. "Been thinking on that. 2 of those bandits' horses didn't run off. They're tied over yonder, not the finest animals, but they'll get you to Seligman." Beatrice was continually surprised by this man's foresight and consideration. "You think of everything, don't you?" A rare smile crossed his face. "Not everything, but I try to plan ahead when I can." Soon they were riding across the open desert, Archer leading the way on his stallion, Beatrice on one of the bandits' horses with Thomas seated in front of her, and Emma riding the second horse, tethered closely to Beatrice's. The girl had insisted she could handle her own mount, and after some initial hesitation, Beatrice had agreed, impressed by her daughter's determination. "Have you always been out west?" Beatrice asked Archer as they rode side by side. He shook his head. "Born in Boston, actually. My father was a shipbuilder, expected me to follow him into the business. What changed? The war. Joined up in '61, fought at Gettysburg and a dozen other places best forgotten." His expression grew distant. "After, I couldn't go back to the life I'd known, too many ghosts. So you came west." "Seemed as good a direction as any. Joined the cavalry for a spell, then tried my hand at ranching down in Texas." He adjusted his hat against the sun. "That didn't take either. And now," Archer glanced at her, "now I'm riding to Seligman with a widow and her 2 children, wondering what comes next." His tone was light, but there was something in his eyes that suggested deeper thoughts. They stopped at midday beneath the shade of a rocky outcropping. While the children explored the immediate area under Beatrice's watchful eye, Archer refilled their canteens from his water supply. "We should reach town by nightfall," he said, handing Beatrice her canteen. Their fingers brushed briefly, and she felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. She quickly attributed it to gratitude. "My sister's name is Clara," Beatrice said, "Clara and Harold Murphy. Their boarding house is called Murphy's Rest." "I know it," Archer nodded. "Solid place, good reputation. Will you stay there too?" Beatrice surprised herself with the question. Archer seemed equally taken aback. "Hadn't thought that far ahead, but if they've got a vacant room, might be sensible." The afternoon passed with the monotonous rhythm of hoofbeats on packed earth. The children, initially excited about the adventure of riding, grew weary as the hours stretched on. Thomas eventually dozed against Beatrice's chest, while Emma valiantly fought to keep her eyes open. "She's got spirit," Archer observed, nodding toward Emma. "Reminds me of my sister." "You have a sister?" Beatrice asked, surprised he'd volunteered this personal detail. "Had," he corrected quietly. "Scarlet fever when she was 12, I was 14. "I'm sorry." Archer nodded his acknowledgement. "It was a long time ago." But sometimes, seeing a child with that same determination brings it all back. As the sun began its descent, Seligman appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a collection of wooden buildings and tents stretched along the railroad tracks that cut through the desert like a man-made river. "There it is," Archer announced. "Your new beginning." Beatrice felt a mix of emotions wash over her. Relief that they'd arrived safely, grief for all they'd lost, anxiety about what lay ahead, and underneath it all, a strange reluctance to end this journey with the enigmatic man beside her. The town grew larger as they approached, revealing itself as a bustling frontier settlement. The railroad station formed the heart of Seligman, with businesses and homes radiating outward from it. Horses and wagons moved along the main street, and the sounds of humanity voices, hammering, a distant piano from what must be a saloon reached them well before they crossed the town's unofficial boundary. "Sheriff's office," Archer pointed out as they rode down the main street. "General store there. The Doc's place is that whitewashed building with the green door." Beatrice absorbed the information gratefully, noting the landmarks. Children darted between buildings, playing some game of chase, and women in calico dresses carried baskets or hung laundry on lines strung between houses. Murphy's Rest should be at the end of this street, then left at the blacksmith's, Archer continued. It's set back a bit, with a big oak tree out front. True to his word, they soon found themselves before a 2-story clapboard house painted a cheerful yellow. A hand-painted sign declaring Murphy's Rest Rooms and Board hung from the porch railing. The promised oak tree spread its branches wide, providing a shady respite from the Arizona sun. Before they could dismount, the front door flew open and a woman who could only be Clara rushed out, her face a study in shock and joy. "Beatrice! Oh my God, Beatrice!" She flew down the steps and across the yard. Archer helped Beatrice down from her horse, steadying her as her feet touched the ground. Thomas, now awake, clung to her skirts while Emma slid down from her mount with unexpected grace. "Clara," Beatrice breathed, embracing her sister. "Oh, it's so good to see you." Clara pulled back, her hands on Beatrice's shoulders as she examined her. "You're early. We weren't expecting you until next week. And where's—" Her eyes darted around, searching for James before landing back on Beatrice's face. The joy in her expression faltered as she registered her sister's hollow-eyed look. What happened?" "The stagecoach was attacked," Beatrice said quietly. James didn't make it." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, my dear sister." She pulled Beatrice into another embrace, this one filled with shared grief rather than joy. Over Clara's shoulder, Beatrice saw Archer standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. After a moment, Clara composed herself and noticed the stranger. "And who might this be?" "This is Archer O'Malley," Beatrice said, stepping back and gesturing toward him. "He saved us from the bandits. We wouldn't be here if not for him." Clara approached Archer with outstretched hands. "Mr. O'Malley, I can't begin to thank you enough." Archer took her hands briefly. "No thanks needed, madam. Just did what any decent man would do." "Nonsense," Clara insisted. "You must stay with us tonight at the very least. Harold will want to thank you properly." Archer looked uncertain. "Don't want to impose." "It's no imposition," Clara assured him. "We have plenty of room and it's the least we can do." A heavy-set man with a kind face and a graying beard appeared on the porch. "Clara, who's arrived?" His eyes widened as he recognized Beatrice. "Why, it's your sister. Come in, all of you." The next few hours passed in a blur of introductions, explanations, and tears. Harold Murphy proved to be as gracious as his wife, insisting that Archer join them for supper after they'd all had a chance to wash away the dust of the road. The children were shown to a small room they would share, while Beatrice was given a comfortable chamber that Clara explained had been prepared in anticipation of her family's arrival. "We'll need to make adjustments now that it's just the three of you," Clara said delicately as she showed Beatrice the room. "Yes," Beatrice agreed, the reality of her new situation still settling around her like an ill-fitting cloak. "Clara, I don't know what we're going to do. James had plans, connections here." Clara squeezed her hand. "Don't worry about that now. You're with family. We'll figure it out together." Downstairs, Archer was offered the best guest room, which he accepted with obvious discomfort at being treated so specially. That evening, they gathered around the Murphys' dining table, a simple but hearty meal before them. Harold insisted on saying grace, adding a special thanks for Archer's intervention and a prayer for James's soul. Beatrice noticed Archer bow his head respectfully, though he didn't close his eyes, instead watching the children with a protective vigilance that touched her. Over beef stew and fresh baked bread, Archer recounted a sanitized version of their rescue for the Murphys' benefit, downplaying his own role and emphasizing Beatrice's courage. She wanted to correct him to make sure her sister knew exactly how brave and skilled he had been, but she understood his modesty and respected it. As the meal progressed, Harold broached the subject they'd all been tiptoeing around. Beatrice, I know this is difficult timing, but I feel I should mention. James had written to me about his plans to purchase land outside town. He was going to raise horses, if I recall correctly. Beatrice nodded. Yes, that was his dream. He grew up around horses in Kentucky. Well, Harold continued carefully, I hate to add to your burdens, but that land will need to be secured soon if you still want it. There's a fellow from California showing interest in the same parcel. I don't know if I can manage a ranch on my own, Beatrice admitted, her voice small. You wouldn't have to decide immediately, Clara interjected, shooting her husband a look. And you could always sell the claim if you chose not to pursue it. How much is the land? Archer asked suddenly. Harold looked surprised by his interest. 500 acres for $800. Good water rights, decent grazing. Archer whistled low. That's fair pricing for these parts. Do you know ranching, Mr. O'Malley? Harold asked. Some, Archer admitted. Worked a cattle spread in Texas for 3 years. Horses are a different business, but the principles are similar. Beatrice felt a flutter of something hope, perhaps in her chest. You mentioned you were coming to Seligman for the deputy position, Archer nodded. That was the plan. Sheriff Tanner's looking for help, from what I heard. Well, Harold said, leaning back in his chair, you should talk to him tomorrow. Good man, Tanner, fair but firm. Town respects him. The conversation drifted to other matters: the railroad's plans to expand service through Seligman, the new schoolhouse being built, the need for more craftsmen as the town grew. Throughout it all, Beatrice found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Archer. There was something compelling about the quiet strength he exuded, the thoughtful way he listened before speaking. After supper, when the children had been put to bed, the adults gathered on the wide front porch. The night air carried a coolness that was welcome after the day's heat. Stars scattered across the desert sky like diamonds on velvet, more numerous than Beatrice had ever seen in Kansas. It's beautiful here, she murmured, wrapped in a shawl Clara had lent her. Different kind of beauty than back east, Archer agreed, leaning against a porch column. Harsher, but more honest somehow. Clara and Harold exchanged a glance at this philosophical observation. Mr. O'Malley, Clara said, forgive my boldness, but you don't strike me as the typical gunslinger. Archer's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. No, madam, I suppose I'm not. Life takes strange turns. Indeed it does, Harold agreed, lighting his pipe. Will you stay in Seligman if Sheriff Tanner hires you on? That's the intention, Archer replied. Been moving too long. Time to plant some roots if the ground's willing. His eyes met Beatrice's as he said this, and she felt a strange connection pass between them, two people at crossroads, seeking solid ground after upheaval. The conversation continued as the evening deepened, but eventually exhaustion caught up with them all. Harold and Clara retired first, leaving Beatrice and Archer alone on the porch. You should rest, Archer said quietly. You've been through more than anyone should have to endure in a day. Beatrice nodded but made no move to leave. I keep thinking I'll wake up and find this was all a terrible dream, that James will be there telling me to hurry with the packing. I wish that could be true, Archer said, for your sake and the children's. The children, Beatrice sighed. They're being so brave, but they don't fully understand yet, especially Thomas. He keeps asking when his father is coming back. Children are resilient, Archer said, but they'll need your strength in the days ahead. I don't know if I have any strength left, Beatrice admitted, the confession slipping out before she could stop it. Archer turned to face her fully. Mrs. Vance, Beatrice, I've only known you a day, but in that time I've seen you protect your children from bandits, bury your husband with dignity, and face an uncertain future without flinching. If that's not strength, I don't know what is. His words warmed something inside her that had gone cold with grief and fear. "Thank you for saying that. It's just the truth." He hesitated, then added, "I should call on Sheriff Tanner early tomorrow, but after. If you'd like some assistance looking into that land claim, I'd be happy to offer an opinion." "That would be very kind," Beatrice said, surprised by the offer and by how much she wanted to accept it. They stood in companionable silence for a moment longer, the night sounds of the desert creating a peaceful backdrop. "Good night, Archer," Beatrice said finally, using his given name for the first time. "Good night, Beatrice," he replied softly. "Tomorrow's a new day." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Beatrice realized that for the first time since the attack, she was looking forward to what tomorrow might bring. Morning in Seligman brought a flurry of activity. Beatrice awoke to find Emma and Thomas already downstairs, being plied with pancakes and syrup by an enthusiastic Clara. Harold had left for his job at the railroad office, and Archer, Clara informed her, had gone to see Sheriff Tanner at first light. "He's a fascinating man, your Mr. O'Malley," Clara commented as she poured Beatrice coffee. "He's not my Mr. O'Malley," Beatrice corrected quickly, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. Clara raised an eyebrow but said nothing, a knowing smile playing at her lips. After breakfast, Beatrice took the children for a walk around Seligman, wanting to familiarize herself with what would now be their home. The town bustled with morning commerce shopkeepers sweeping boardwalks, freight wagons delivering goods, women gossiping as they examined produce at a small market. They passed the sheriff's office, a sturdy building with the territorial flag hanging beside the door. Through the window, Beatrice caught a glimpse of Archer sitting across from an older man with a silver star pinned to his vest. Their expressions were serious, engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion. "Is that the man who saved us, Ma?" Emma asked, following her gaze. "Yes, dear. Mr. O'Malley is talking to the sheriff about becoming his deputy. Will he be staying in Seligman with us?" Thomas wanted to know. Beatrice hesitated. "I don't know, sweetheart. That depends on many things." They continued their exploration, finding the schoolhouse where the children would soon attend, the church that stood at the north end of town, and various shops they would frequent. Everywhere they went, people greeted them with the curious friendliness of small-town folk encountering newcomers. By midday, they had returned to Murphy's Rest, where Clara was preparing lunch. To Beatrice's surprise, Archer was seated at the kitchen table, deep in conversation with her sister. He stood when they entered, and Beatrice couldn't help noticing that he'd shaved and changed into a clean shirt. The effect was striking. He looked younger, less weathered, though no less formidable. "Mrs. Vance," he greeted her formally, aware of the children's presence. "I was just telling your sister about my meeting with Sheriff Tanner." And Beatrice found herself holding her breath. A smile broke across his face, transforming his features. "I start tomorrow, Deputy O'Malley at your service." The children cheered, surprising both adults. "That means you're staying," Emma declared triumphantly. "It does indeed," Archer confirmed, looking at Beatrice with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "If that's agreeable to everyone." "Of course it is," Clara answered before Beatrice could speak. "In fact, you must continue to stay with us until you find suitable accommodations. Deputies don't make fortunes, and the room rates at Murphy's Rest are very reasonable." Archer laughed, a rich sound that Beatrice realized she hadn't heard before. "You drive a hard bargain, Mrs. Murphy." Over lunch, Archer explained that Sheriff Tanner had been impressed by his military background and experience. The town was growing rapidly due to the railroad, bringing prosperity but also the inevitable troubles that accompanied expansion. "He's concerned about a gang that's been operating between here and Prescott," Archer explained. "Stage robberies mostly. Could be the same bunch that attacked your coach." Beatrice shuddered at the memory. "Will you be hunting them?" "That's part of the job," Archer confirmed. "But Tanner's a methodical man. Wants to gather more information before we make any moves." After the meal, Clara shooed them out, insisting that she needed to prepare for the evening's boarders. "Why don't you show Archer that land Harold mentioned?" she suggested with thinly veiled matchmaking intentions. "I couldn't impose," Archer began. "You did offer your opinion," Beatrice reminded him, "and I could use the guidance." And so, leaving the children in Clara's care, Beatrice found herself riding beside Archer once more, this time heading southeast of town toward the parcel James had planned to purchase. "Your sister is quite the force of nature," Archer commented as they rode. Beatrice laughed. "She's always been that way. Decided what was best for everyone and made sure it happened." "And is this what's best for you?" Archer asked, his tone serious now. Coming to her aid at the boarding house, the question caught Beatrice off guard. I haven't really had time to think about what I want. Everything's happened so fast." "I understand," he said softly. "Sometimes life doesn't give us time to consider, just pushes us forward into whatever comes next." They crested a small rise, and suddenly the land opened before them, a sweeping expanse of grassland dotted with scrub and occasional stands of juniper, bordered on one side by a line of cottonwoods that suggested water. "That would be Ash Creek," Archer said, pointing to the trees. "Runs year-round, from what I hear. Vital for any ranch operation." They rode down to the creek, dismounting to let the horses drink while they explored on foot. Archer pointed out features of the land with the practiced eye of someone who understood ranching, good grazing areas, natural boundaries, the gentle slope that would allow for drainage during the rainy season. "Your husband chose well," he concluded. "This is fine land for horses. Protected enough for foaling, open enough for exercise." Beatrice stood at the creek's edge, watching the clear water flow over smooth stones. "He had a good eye for land. Our farm in Kansas was beautiful before the drought." "What will you do?" Archer asked, standing beside her. "About this place, I mean." She sighed, picking up a small stone and turning it in her palm. "I don't know. The sensible thing would be to sell the claim. Take the money and help Clara with the boarding house until..." "Until what?" "Until she remarried. Until she found some other path." "Sensible isn't always right," Archer said quietly. Beatrice looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "Just that sometimes the heart wants what reason says is foolish." He met her gaze steadily. "Your husband had a dream for this land. Maybe that dream can still have life, even if in a different form." "I know nothing about raising horses," Beatrice admitted, "but you know about hard work and perseverance." He hesitated, then added, "And you wouldn't have to do it alone. There are people who would help." The implication hung in the air between them. Beatrice felt her heart quicken. "People like you. If that would be welcome," he said carefully. She turned away, overwhelmed by the possibilities suddenly opening before her. "We barely know each other, Archer." "That's true," he acknowledged. "And I'm not suggesting. That is, I understand it's too soon to." He trailed off, uncharacteristically flustered. Beatrice surprised herself by laughing softly. "I believe this is the first time I've seen you at a loss for words." His answering smile was sheepish. "Give me bandits any day over trying to express myself properly to a lady." The tension broken. They continued their exploration of the property, discussing practical matters, the cost of fencing, where a cabin might be built, how many horses the land could sustain. By the time they mounted up to return to town, Beatrice felt a sense of possibility she hadn't expected to find. "Thank you," she said as they rode side by side in the late afternoon sun. "Not just for today, but for..." For everything. You don't need to thank me, Archer replied. But you're welcome all the same. Back in Seligman, they found the boarding house abuzz with activity. New guests had arrived and Clara was in her element, directing everyone with cheerful efficiency. Harold had returned from work and immediately pulled Archer aside to discuss something in hushed tones that left both men looking serious. Later, as they gathered for dinner, now joined by 4 other boarders, Harold made an announcement that sent a chill through Beatrice. "Sheriff Tanner stopped by with news," he said gravely. The stage line reported another robbery attempt near Prescott. The driver recognized one of the bandits as having a distinctive scar across his cheek. Beatrice's fork clattered to her plate. "The leader," she whispered. "The one you let go." She looked at Archer. He nodded, his expression grim. "Seems he didn't take my warning to heart." "Tanner wants to see you tonight," Harold continued. "Says they're organizing a posse to track them down before they hit another stage." The other boarders began peppering Harold with questions about the robberies and the safety of the roads, but Beatrice hardly heard them. Her mind was filled with the image of the bandit leader's hateful eyes as he'd aimed his gun at her children. After dinner, as Archer prepared to leave for the sheriff's office, Beatrice followed him onto the porch. "You're going after them," she said. "It wasn't a question." "It's why Tanner hired me," he replied, checking his gun belt with practiced movements. "We can't let them continue terrorizing the roads. But it's dangerous. You've seen how they operate." Archer's expression softened. "Are you concerned for me, Beatrice?" "Of course I am," she admitted, not seeing any point in denying it. "You saved our lives, and now—" She hesitated, uncertain how to express the connection she felt forming between them. "Now I'm riding into danger again," he finished for her. "It's what I'm good at, and it needs doing." "I know," she said quietly. "Just be careful." He stepped closer, and for a breathless moment she thought he might embrace her. Instead, he gently took her hand in his. "I'll return," he promised. "We have unfinished conversations, you and I." With that, he released her hand, settled his hat on his head, and strode into the gathering darkness, his figure soon swallowed by the night. The next morning brought the news that Archer had ridden out with Sheriff Tanner and 6 other men before dawn. They'd received information about the bandits' likely hideout in the mountains north of Prescott and hoped to catch them unawares. "How long will they be gone?" Beatrice asked Harold at breakfast. "Hard to say," he replied. "Could be a few days, could be a week or more. Depends on how far they have to track them." The children were disappointed to learn of Archer's departure. In the short time they'd known him, he'd made a strong impression on both of them, Thomas with stories of cavalry horses, and Emma with patient answers to her endless questions about life in the West. "Will Mr. O'Malley come back?" Thomas asked, his small face serious. "Of course he will, silly," Emma answered before Beatrice could. "He promised Ma." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm at her daughter's perceptiveness. "Mr. O'Malley has an important job to do," she said evenly. "But yes, he will return when it's finished." The days that followed settled into a routine. Beatrice helped Clara with the boarding house, learning the business while the children began attending the local school. She visited the land claim office and, after much deliberation, decided to secure James's claim using the money they'd salvaged from the stagecoach robbery. It wasn't a commitment to ranching, she told herself, just preserving options until she could make a more informed decision. In the evenings, she often found herself on the porch, gazing in the direction Archer and the posse had ridden, wondering where he was and if he was safe. Clara noticed but wisely refrained from comment, simply bringing her sister tea and quiet company. A week passed, then 10 days. Beatrice threw herself into work, helping to refurbish rooms at the boarding house, and meeting with a builder about what it would cost to erect a modest cabin on her land. The activity kept her mind occupied, but at night, when the house grew quiet, her thoughts inevitably turned to Archer. It was foolish, she knew. They'd spent barely 2 days in each other's company. Yet in those intense hours, facing death together and finding a path forward, they'd formed a connection that felt significant in a way she couldn't easily dismiss. On the 11th day, as Beatrice was hanging laundry in the yard behind Murphy's Rest, she heard a commotion from the direction of the main street. Shouts and the sound of horses arriving at speed sent a ripple of alarm through her. Setting down her basket, she hurried around the house just as Emma came racing up the street from the direction of the school. Ma," the girl called. "They're back. The sheriff and the posse are back." Beatrice's heart leapt, then immediately constricted with fear. "Are they all right? Is Mr. O'Malley with them?" "I don't know," Emma panted. "There's a crowd. I couldn't see everyone." Together they hurried toward the center of town, where a crowd had indeed gathered around the returning posse. Beatrice pushed her way through, scanning faces anxiously until she spotted Sheriff Tanner dismounting wearily from his horse. The men looked exhausted, their clothes filthy and torn in places, evidence of hard riding and rough country. And then she saw him, Archer, slipping down from his saddle with a grimace of pain, his left arm bound in a makeshift sling. His face was sunburned and stubbled with beard growth, but he was alive. "Archer," she called before she could stop herself. He turned at the sound of her voice, and even through his evident fatigue, his eyes lit up at the sight of her. He made his way toward her, moving carefully to protect his injured arm. "Mrs. Vance," he greeted her formally, mindful of the public setting, though his eyes conveyed a warmer message. "Miss Emma." "You're hurt," Beatrice said, unable to keep the concern from her voice. "It's nothing serious," he assured her. "Bullet grazed me during the final confrontation. Doc says it'll heal clean." Emma was practically bouncing with excitement. "Did you catch the bad men, all of them?" Archer's expression turned somber. "We did, Emma. They won't be troubling anyone again." The meaning behind his words was clear to Beatrice. Justice in the territories was often swift and final. She felt no joy at the thought of men dying, even those who had killed her husband, but there was relief in knowing the danger they posed was ended. "Thomas will be sorry he missed your return," Beatrice said. "He's still at school." "I look forward to seeing the boy," Archer replied. "But first I need to finish up with the sheriff and get cleaned up. I imagine I'm quite a sight." "And you need proper medical attention," Beatrice insisted. "Yes, madam," he agreed with a tired smile. "I'll call at Murphy's Rest this evening if that would be acceptable." "Of course," she replied, suddenly aware of the curious glances they were receiving from townspeople. We'll expect you for dinner." With a tip of his hat, Archer rejoined Sheriff Tanner, and Beatrice led Emma back toward the boarding house, her mind racing with relief and anticipation. That evening, Archer arrived at Murphy's Rest freshly bathed and shaved, his injured arm properly bandaged and resting in a sling. The children greeted him enthusiastically, peppering him with questions about the posse's adventures until Clara shooed them away to wash up for dinner. Left momentarily alone in the parlor, Beatrice and Archer regarded each other with a new awareness. "I was worried," she admitted quietly. "I know," he said. "It kept me going knowing I had a promise to keep." Before she could respond, Clara called them to dinner, and the moment passed. At the table, Archer recounted a sanitized version of their pursuit and capture of the bandits, emphasizing the bravery of the posse members rather than the violence of the encounter. The children hung on every word, while Beatrice observed the careful way he shaped the story to protect their innocence. After the meal, when the children had been sent to bed despite vigorous protests, the adults gathered in the parlor. Harold poured small glasses of brandy, and they toasted the safe return of the posse. "Sheriff Tanner speaks highly of you," Harold told Archer. "Says you kept a cool head when things got dicey." Archer shrugged his good shoulder. "Just did what needed doing." "That seems to be your motto," Clara observed with a smile. "It served me well enough," Archer replied. He glanced at Beatrice. "I heard you secured the land claim." She nodded. "It seemed the right thing to do, for now at least." "A wise decision," Harold approved. "Land in these parts will only increase in value as the railroad expands." Clara, ever sensitive to undercurrents, stood suddenly. "Harold, I just remembered we need to discuss the supply order for next week, in detail, in the kitchen." Her husband looked confused for a moment before understanding dawned. "Oh, yes, the supplies. Very important." He rose and followed his wife from the room with all the subtlety of a charging buffalo. Left alone, Beatrice and Archer shared an amused glance at the transparent maneuver. "Your sister is not one for half measures," Archer commented. "No," Beatrice agreed. "She's always been direct about what she wants." "And what about you, Beatrice?" Archer asked, his voice soft but intent. "What do you want?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibilities. Beatrice found herself at a crossroads, the safe path of widowhood and gradual recovery, or the unknown territory of new beginnings. "I want." She began hesitantly. "I want not to be afraid anymore. Of what might happen, of being alone, of making the wrong choices for my children." Archer moved to sit beside her on the small sofa. "Fear isn't something that ever goes away entirely," he said. "Not for anyone, but it can be faced together." "Is that what you're offering?" she asked, meeting his gaze. "Partnership in facing fear." "I'm offering whatever you're willing to accept," he answered honestly. "Friendship, certainly. Support with your land and children if you want it, and, perhaps in time, something more." Beatrice felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the brandy. "It's too soon for promises," she said carefully. "I'm still mourning James, still finding my footing in this new life." "I understand," Archer said. "I'm not asking for promises, just possibility." She smiled then, a genuine expression that reached her eyes for the first time in many days. "Possibility I can agree to." Their conversation turned to practical matters: his duties as deputy, her plans for the land, the children's adjustment to their new home. Yet beneath the ordinary topics ran a current of connection, an understanding that something significant had begun between them. When Archer rose to leave, they stood facing each other in the parlor, the lamplight casting soft shadows around them. "I'm glad you came back safely," Beatrice said. "I had good reason to," he replied. He hesitated, then gently took her hand in his. "May I call on you properly, Beatrice? Not just as someone who shared a difficult journey, but as a man who wishes to know you better." The formal request, so unexpected yet so fitting for this honorable man, touched her deeply. "Yes," she answered. "I'd like that very much." He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, the gesture both old-fashioned and intensely intimate. "Good night, then." "Good night, Archer," she whispered, watching as he departed into the night, his steps lighter than when he had arrived. The weeks that followed saw a gradual transformation in Beatrice's life. With Clara and Harold's support, she established herself in Seligman, becoming known not as just the widow from the stagecoach tragedy, but as a woman of strength and purpose. True to his word, Archer called on her regularly. Their courtship for that was what it had become, though neither had named it, yet progressed with careful respect for her grief and the children's adjustment. He accompanied her to church on Sundays, joined the family for picnics by Ash Creek, and spent evenings on the porch of Murphy's Rest, talking long after the children were abed. The children took to him naturally. Thomas, especially, followed Archer like a shadow whenever possible, absorbing his knowledge of horses and the West with avid interest. Emma, more reserved at first, gradually warmed to him after he presented her with a journal bound in soft leather, encouraging her love of writing. "You're good with them," Beatrice observed one evening as they watched the children playing in the yard. "They make it easy," Archer replied. "They're remarkable kids, strong like their mother." She smiled at the compliment. "They've been through so much." "Sometimes I worry they've lost too much of their childhood." "Children are resilient," Archer reminded her, "and they have you to guide them." As the summer progressed, Beatrice made decisions about her land. With Archer's advice and Harold's business acumen, she developed a modest plan to establish a small horse breeding operation, focusing initially on supplying mounts for the stagecoach companies and local ranchers. Construction began on a simple cabin near the creek, and Archer spent his days off helping with the building, working alongside the hired carpenters with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. Watching him raise the roof beams, his shirt damp with honest labor, Beatrice felt a surge of emotion that went beyond gratitude or friendship. Their first kiss came on a warm September evening. Archer had escorted Beatrice back to Murphy's Rest after they'd spent the afternoon at her land, discussing plans for corrals and stables. The children had remained in town with Clara for a baking lesson, giving the adults rare time alone. As they stood on the porch in the golden light of sunset, the conversation lulled into comfortable silence. Archer gazed at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Beatrice," he said softly, "I've tried to be patient to give you the time and space you deserve. But I find myself thinking of you every waking moment," She silenced him by stepping closer, her hand resting lightly on his chest. "I've been thinking of you too," she admitted. "More than I should, perhaps." "There are no shoulds in matters of the heart," he murmured, his hand coming up to cover hers. "Only what is true." "And what is true for you, Archer O'Malley?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That I'm falling in love with you," he answered simply. "That I want to build something lasting with you and the children, if you'll have me." Instead of answering with words, Beatrice raised herself on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as his arm encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I take it that's a favorable response," Archer said, a smile playing at his lips. Beatrice laughed softly. "Very favorable." As autumn painted the landscape in russet and gold, their relationship blossomed. Beatrice moved with the children into the cabin on her land, now complete enough for habitation though still lacking some finishing touches. The proximity to town allowed Emma and Thomas to continue their schooling while Beatrice began acquiring horses for her fledgling ranch. Archer, still serving as deputy, rode out whenever his duties allowed, helping with the endless tasks of establishing a working ranch and spending precious hours with the family that was increasingly becoming his own. The townsfolk observed the developing relationship with approving nods and knowing smiles. Sheriff Tanner, gruff but fair-minded, arranged Archer's schedule to allow him consecutive days at the ranch when possible. "Man needs roots," he commented to Beatrice when she thanked him. "Been watching Archer find his. Does a heart good." It was on Christmas Eve that Archer finally spoke the words that had been building between them. The cabin was decorated with pine boughs and candles, a modest tree adorned with paper ornaments the children had made standing in the corner. After Emma and Thomas had hung their stockings and gone to bed, vibrating with excitement for the morning, Archer and Beatrice sat before the fireplace, sharing mulled cider and the peaceful quiet. "I have something for you," Archer said, reaching into his pocket. "Wanted to give it to you privately before tomorrow's celebrations." He handed her a small wooden box carved with intricate patterns. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a simple gold ring with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," Archer explained, his voice husky with emotion. "She gave it to me before she passed, said to save it for when I found the woman who made me want to stop wandering." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears as she looked from the ring to his face. "Archer, I love you, Beatrice," he said, taking her hands in his. "I love Emma and Thomas as if they were my own. I want us to be a family officially, permanently. Will you marry me?" The tears spilled over as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and as it settled there, Beatrice felt as though the final piece of her new life had fallen into place. When they kissed, it held all the promise of the future they would build together. They were married on New Year's Day, 1876, in Seligman's white clapboard church. Emma served as her mother's maid of honor, while Thomas proudly stood as Archer's best man. Clara wept openly throughout the ceremony, and even Harold was seen to dab at his eyes. Sheriff Tanner gave the bride away, joking that it was the happiest arrest he'd ever made. The reception was held at Murphy's Rest, the boarding house overflowing with well-wishers from town. As husband and wife danced in the parlor, Beatrice couldn't help marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Archer asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About how life can change in an instant," she replied. "How the worst day of my life led eventually to this happiness." He nodded in understanding. "From darkness to light, it's the way of things sometimes. When I begged those bandits for mercy," she said quietly, "I never imagined where that plea would lead." Archer's arms tightened around her. "Then mercy's what you'll have," he quoted his own words from that fateful day. "For all our days together, Beatrice, that's my promise to you." As winter gave way to spring, the O'Malley Ranch began to flourish. The first foals were born in March, their wobbly legs and curious faces bringing joy to the entire family. Archer had resigned his position as deputy to work full-time alongside Beatrice, though he maintained a close friendship with Sheriff Tanner and occasionally assisted with particularly troublesome cases. Emma and Thomas blossomed under the stability of their new family structure. Emma's talent for storytelling developed alongside her responsibilities on the ranch, while Thomas showed a natural affinity for horsemanship that made Archer beam with pride. Both children now called him Pa, a transition that had come naturally and without pressure. On a warm evening in May, as the family sat on the porch of their now completed ranch house, watching the sunset paint the desert in spectacular hues, Beatrice leaned against her husband's shoulder. "I have news," she said softly. Archer looked down at her, a question in his eyes. "We'll need to add another bedroom by winter," she told him, a smile spreading across her face. "For a new O'Malley." Joy bloomed in Archer's expression as the meaning of her words sank in. "A baby, you're certain?" She nodded, and he pulled her into a gentle embrace, mindful of her condition. "Did you hear that, you two?" he called to Emma and Thomas, who were playing a game of checkers at the other end of the porch. "You're going to have a little brother or sister." Their exclamations of surprise and delight filled the evening air as they rushed to their parents, full of questions and excitement. Later, when the children had gone to bed, Archer and Beatrice stood together under the vast canopy of stars, his arms wrapped protectively around her. "Are you happy?" he asked, his chin resting on top of her head. "Completely," she answered without hesitation. "This life we've built together, It's more than I ever dared hope for. It all started with mercy, Archer mused. Strange how a simple word can change everything. Not just the word, Beatrice corrected, turning in his arms to face him. The action. You could have ridden past that day, left us to our fate, but you chose mercy. You chose to help strangers in need. Best decision I ever made, he said, his voice thick with emotion. For all of us, she agreed, stretching up to kiss him. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the night sky, a silent witness to the love that had grown from tragedy. The family forged in the crucible of the Wild West, and the mercy that had changed everything. In the years that followed, the O'Malley Ranch became one of the most respected horse breeding operations in the Arizona Territory. Their reputation for quality stock spread beyond Seligman, bringing buyers from as far as California and Texas. Beatrice gave birth to a healthy daughter they named Hope, followed 2 years later by a son they called James, in honor of the man whose dream had, in a way, made their lives possible. Emma grew into a poised young woman with her mother's strength, and a talent for writing that eventually led to her stories being published in newspapers across the West. Thomas developed into a skilled horse trainer who worked alongside Archer with an almost telepathic understanding of the animals. And Beatrice and Archer, whose love had bloomed from the ashes of tragedy, remained each other's steadfast companions through all of life's joys and sorrows. Their story became something of a legend in Seligman, the widow who had cried for mercy, and the cowboy who had answered her plea, creating from that moment of desperation a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come. For in the wild and often unforgiving landscape of the frontier, they had discovered the most powerful truth of all, that mercy, freely given and gratefully received, could transform not just a single moment but an entire lifetime.